For my trading system, Mondays are the most important day of the week. Where most traders let Monday develop, let Monday play out, and let the Monday range form before they engage, I actually execute most of my trades on Mondays or Tuesdays. Because I mainly intraday trade Bitcoin, as you guys know, and data over the past few years that I have quantified into statistics are proving that around 86% of the weekly candles form the high or the low for the weekly candle on Monday or Tuesday. Around 63% of the weekly candles form it on Monday, meaning that if I anticipate a bullish bias, 86% of those bullish weekly candles form the low on a Monday. If I have a bearish bias, and we are going to develop a bearish weekly candle, 86% of the weekly highs form on Monday or Tuesday. So where most people relax on a Monday, let their Monday range develop, I actually think that as a trader, Mondays are the days. Every Monday before I touch the charts, I make sure to get a morning walk, just to get a clear mind, clear start before I touch the chart and before I figure out my plans for the day.
So you do this walk every single Monday?
Every single day even, right after breakfast. Most people wait for a Tuesday or a Wednesday to get involved in the market. But like I said, around 63-65% of the weekly candles form the most important pivot for the weekly candle on a Monday. Another 23% form it on a Tuesday. So basically that means that on Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays, you can still trade, but what you are basically doing is trading the leftovers of Monday and Tuesday. What I usually do is that on Monday and Tuesday I try to form a bias for the week, and I try to position myself up on forming that very strong and important first pivot. And then on Wednesday, Thursdays and Fridays, when price is confirming the direction by making new pivots towards the upside or towards the downside, I'm trying to trade the continuations instead of the reversals. But by playing the continuations, it means that for a fact, you have already missed the majority of the move. Meaning that it's so important to focus on trading Mondays and Tuesdays because that's where the most important pivots for every single weekly candle are being formed. As you guys can see, I've got the last year of data over here on Bitcoin. And we can see that 64.7% of the weekly candles form the first pivot on Monday. 23.5% of the weekly candles form the first pivot on a Tuesday, and we can see only 7.8 and 3.9% of the weekly candles forming on Wednesday and Thursday. The last year, 0% of the weekly candles have formed the first pivot on Friday, Saturday or Sunday, and the majority of the second pivots get formed on Friday and Sunday. 29.4% on a Friday, 31.4% on a Sunday. I will elaborate later on this a little bit more obviously as well, but key takeaway, Monday and Tuesday are putting in the first pivot on the weekly candles on Bitcoin based on time.
So Jip, what's more important to you? Price or the timing of price?
Price means nothing if it doesn't align with time, Max. But let me elaborate a little bit more on this with the chart. Now let's say we have the weekly candle once again, and we have our weekly open over here, weekly close over here, and this is where the Wednesday candle starts, right? So once again, this is Monday and Tuesday. Now, if we once again have that bullish bias, so we have a drawn liquidity from last week, for example, resting over here, and this is where the weekly candle opens, and we get that dump. But then instead of getting a reversal structure, once the Wednesday candle opens right over here, price then forms that new weekly low, and it then forms that liquidity sweep before that reversal structure takes place. Now usually I would say this is a strong reversal structure that is taking place. But because this low over here was formed on a Wednesday and not on a Monday or Tuesday, where we know that around 86% of the weekly candles form the first pivot, I know that based on timing, this pivot over here, this low, is a low probability pivot. So where I would usually trade the reversal to anticipate a bullish week towards my target, in this case, because this pivot over here was formed on a Wednesday after the Wednesday candle opened and not formed on a Monday or Tuesday, where I want that low to be formed, I am not gonna take this long. Because what I then want to do is wait for a pullback, wait for a bearish reversal structure over here, and then trade the price back lower, because I know that this pivot over here is likely gonna get taken out later throughout the week.
So what do you do if price doesn't reverse in your favor, makes a new second pivot against your trade on Wednesday?
So once again, let's say we have our drawn liquidity over here, price dumps, and then over here, this is where Monday starts, this is where Wednesday starts, and this is where the weekly candle is gonna close. Now, if I position myself indeed over here on the Monday, so we have the reversal structure, and I decide that this is a strong pivot over here, and then I want to get long towards the drawn liquidity right over here. Now, if I get long right here, and price pushes up a little bit, and then on Wednesday, it forms a new pivot to the downside, I know that my trade is invalidated, because I know that once this happens, all of a sudden, that high that we form at the opposite side, so that first pivot of the weekly candle, then there's an 86% probability to hold. So I know that it's very likely gonna hold until the end of the week. So I know that it's much more likely that the rest of the weekly candle is gonna continue towards the downside instead of continuing towards the upside. So Wednesday for me is validating my trade idea or invalidating my trading idea. It's very simple. If it confirms the direction over here towards the upside, then I know that I can start playing continuations towards the drawn liquidity. If it makes a new pivot against my trade, it's a super simple invalidation. Because if I then still try to get long over here, I'm basically playing a 14% probability, because there's an 86% probability that the opposite pivot is going to hold in that case. Basically what I've just been explaining and also using the dashboard is my weekly profile every single week on Bitcoin. I sit down on a Monday morning after I do my morning routine, then I sit down and I figure out my bias. If my bias is bullish based on the drawn liquidity over here, then I try to time the low of the weekly candle on Monday or Tuesday, because I know that if I get a bullish weekly candle, 86% of those weekly candles would form the low on a Monday or Tuesday. If my bias is bearish and I have drawn liquidity to the downside, then I try to time the high of the weekly candle on Monday or Tuesday. And then Wednesdays are either validating my ideas and biases or invalidating them. If they validate them, then on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, I will try to look for continuation trades on top of my original reversal trade. If they are invalidating them, then I'm waiting for a pullback to either get out break even on my invalidated bullish or bearish idea, or I wait for the pullback and then I try to play the reversal over here to the downside if I get a break of structure, and then if I get the confirmation for a continuation against my bias. Okay, and that is basically all in all how my weekly profile every single week for Bitcoin looks. But you and I both know that this, what I've just been explaining, is not getting validated if I don't show a real-time example. A few weeks ago, during the first week of July, I was already positioned in 2 long positions, as you can see right over here on Bitcoin. But on the 7th of July, we had a new weekly open right over here. I'm also going to mark out the weekly close, which is right over here, as you guys know. And then I'm also going to mark out the opening of the Wednesday candle, because as we know, Monday and Tuesday are extremely pivotal. And I'm going to mark out those Monday and Tuesday over here in yellow. If I play this chart while I was already positioned in 2 longs on Bitcoin, and I play the chart right over here, and in the meantime, my invalidation originally was placed over here, but I already decided to tighten it to this low over here, we can see that Bitcoin, after the weekly candle opened, started off with a dump to the downside. I formed my bias and my bias was bullish. I was expecting a push towards $170,000 for Bitcoin, meaning that I was expecting Bitcoin to form the low of the week for the bullish weekly candle on Monday or on Tuesday over here, as we discussed in this video. We can see if I continue to play the chart that eventually, once the Wednesday candle opened right over here, I started to become interested in another long on Bitcoin. Because what I can see is that Bitcoin swept weak in liquidity over here. It formed a first low on a Monday. Now we can see that once Tuesday opened right over here, It swept Monday's low, and then it broke structure back towards the upside right over here. So I knew if this weekly candle indeed is going to be a bullish one on Bitcoin, it needs to defend the low that it put in a time period of Monday and Tuesday right over here. So that to me was a very, very strong invalidation for my bullish thesis. So I knew that I could then tighten my stop loss from this low over here towards that low over here. And that could mean that I could add a third long position. And as you guys can see right over here, I wouldn't be myself if I didn't share the signal upfront in the trading community. I was telling the people that I was going to add another Bitcoin long position, risking 1R with a market entry, and that I was tightening my stop loss over here. Now, eventually, I indeed did enter a third long position right over here for the price of Bitcoin with my invalidation below Tuesday's low, and it paid off a big time because we can see that afterwards Bitcoin started a massive pump all the way towards new all-time highs, all the way towards $117,000, and I once again wouldn't be myself if I didn't have the profit P&L screenshot over here to back up the actual realized profits.
Eu goi no caco, goi no caco, eu goi no caco, goi no caco.